Hi, my name is Sammy Diaz. My mentor's name is Linda Kernan, and I'm reading an excerpt from my short story, Slip. He stood at the end of the long hallway, the light streaming through the doorway behind him, making him nothing more than a darkened silhouette breathing out nicotine. His face was featureless from where she was standing. The smoke trailed off from a cigarette, drifting away like loose threads, coming apart. I'm never going to be able to say it, am I? She said. You know the answer to that, he replied, his voice no higher than a whisper, transient as the smoke he was breathing out. So you don't feel the same, she said. Janet, that's not true. I just can't say it. You can't say it, but that doesn't mean the feeling isn't there. That's not good enough anymore. I need to get the words out. They had been down this road before, and now the familiarity of it all made her physically ill. She tried to prop herself up, her hand pressing against the wall, but her body was collapsing and she couldn't save it. Her knees hit the floor first, and then she doubled over, her forehead touching the floor as though in prayer. It was becoming too hard to breathe, not because of the smoke, but because the air was solidifying in her lungs, becoming concrete. She couldn't keep living with the feeling alone, couldn't live without the words put out into the ether. It was driving her insane, this overbearing silence that seemed to follow her at all times, haunting her like a ghost. She tried to hear something, anything, the cigarette burning to nothing, the microscopic pieces of skin flaking off his fingertips, but their lives had been sealed in a vacuum. It's never felt like more of a curse than it does now. You always say that. There's no curse, David. Curses don't exist, she shouted, trying to find his eyes blackened out by the shadows. It always came back to the curse. With loving words, I'll disappear. She had heard this curse so many times that it was tattooed upon her brain. If you don't feel anything for me anymore, then just say it. Stop being a coward, stop hiding behind this curse, and just say it. She pushed her hands against the ground, feeling the grit of dirt scrape against her palms as she managed to rise to her feet. She ran down the long hallway. As she got closer, the shadows disappeared, revealing the deep oceanic blue of his eyes, the dark gloss of his hair, his pale lips parted slightly to let the smoke escape them with ease. She was there, finally there, and her arms wrapped around the warm skin of his neck, her eyes closed tightly, her lips pressed against his, and the smoke caught between them. I love you, she whispered, the word she had always wanted to say to him finally coming into existence. But there was no answer. Only the weight underneath her arms, shifting, lessening, disappearing. She tried to push her lips further into his, but there was no more pressure there, nothing to push against, and she fell forward. She opened her eyes to the harsh white light of the room in front of her. His body was no longer there to block the sunlight. She clasped her hands over her mouth and shook her head, her eyes widening. With loving words, I'll disappear.